Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion. It's not a straightforward review. It's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening. Hey, this is Lisa, and you can catch me on Twitter at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to support us on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. And I want to take a moment to thank my top patrons there, Chris Balga, Jeff Widman, Philip Barker, Michael Cross, and Josh Johnson. Thank you so much for keeping the lights on. And if you like what you hear today, please subscribe and rate the show. It does help new listeners find us. Well, I have a returning guest on the podcast. I have Sarah, who is the co-host of the Geeks Chasing Squirrels podcast. Say hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. Good to talk to you again. We
Yes,
talked not super recently, but fairly recently.
right. Well, thanks for the invite again because always any time to sit with good friends and just talk fantastic movies and things we love and life and all that kind of good stuff. So
For sure. I really
always
appreciate
fun.
having you. Yeah. I guess if people haven't heard your voice on the podcast before, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, I'm Sarah Taylor. You can catch me on Twitter at My Little Kitten, and you can also catch me Friday nights at 9 Eastern on the Geeks Chasing Squirrels podcast with my fellow co-hosts Greg and Ross. We talk about pretty much anything and everything geek. We love talking about current films, current TV. I don't want to say TV shows, but it's like streaming shows now. I know, right? It's crazy.
That's
And pretty
weird
much
to think about, but
anything.
you're right.
I know, and it's and anything and everything in between, and the squirrels. Hey, man, we chase them left and right. It's we have a good time. You never know where our conversations are going to lead.
I agree. It's a good time, both listening and being on it. It's just like hanging out with a group of friends. It's so fun.
And that's the whole point. I mean, we just love, these are things that we love. We love hearing each other's opinions. We love, sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. But for the most part, I mean, it's fun.
Yeah,
It's like a virtual sitting on the couch Friday night, just kind of kicking back and just hanging with a bunch of friends. I mean, and we love having everybody into the chat. We love interacting with them. And also anytime anyone ever wants to come on the show, I mean, we always have an open door. So, and of course
that's
that
so
goes for
great.
you, Lisa.
Yeah, I love being on. Well, Sarah, my guest always picks the movie. So what movie did you choose to talk about today?
Well, when you asked me about it, I know we've talked about different films and whatnot, and then it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, I have got to choose a film from one of my absolutely favorite actors, and that is Gerard Butler, which I think Gerard is more of like the American way to pronounce it, because I think it's more like, I forgot how exactly it was supposed to be pronounced, but I don't care. Anything he's in, I'm going to watch. So one of my absolute favorite films is, I believe it's 2003 or 2004, The Phantom of the Opera. That was one
Yes.
of those films I can watch over and over and over again. And actually, like the first of the year, it was showing at my local theater that I love to go to, and I went, watched it again, and was like watching it for the first time. Absolutely love this film.
Oh, that's great. I actually have never seen it, so this is my first time watching it all the way through.
I actually picked something you haven't seen. Oh, yes.
Yes, and I love it when people do that because I think this is like one of those movies that I've been meaning to watch, but I just
Mhm.
haven't. I've also never like seen the play. So like completely new. I mean, I've heard the music, but
Mhm.
I just haven't like watched it, enjoyed it. So, my first time was watching it was recently. So, I'm excited to talk about it. Now, before we continue, I do want to warn listeners that we will not be spoiler free. So if you haven't seen this, I would recommend watching it first. But if you're still with us, this is the synopsis of the film. From his hideout beneath a 19th century Paris opera house, the brooding phantom schemes to get closer to vocalist Christine. The phantom, wearing a mask to hide a congenital disfigurement, strong arms management into giving the budding starlet key roles, but Christine instead falls for arts benefactor Raoul. Terrified at the notion of her absence, the phantom enacts a plan to keep Christine by his side while Raoul tries to foil the scheme. Well, so have you seen the play as well?
I was gonna say that. I have to go way, 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 way back when I was basically my son's age 12. So 12 going on 13. It was eighth grade, middle school. It was like the coolest thing because we took two trips that year. We took one trip to New York and one trip to, I believe it was Toronto, Canada.
Oh,
So when we went
nice, fun.
to, yes, it was, we were like super spoiled. It was great. The bus ride was
That
not
I'm
fun, but
jealous.
everything
Yeah.
else was. So honestly, that's been the only time I've ever been to New York. So we had the opportunity of actually going to a show on Broadway, and it
Oh,
was Phantom of
wonderful.
the Opera. So I still remember bits and pieces of it, and it was the one thing I can really remember was at the very end. It was like you saw the mask, and it had like the light that was showing straight on it, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just so haunting. And
Yeah.
growing up, I always knew what the story of the Phantom of the Opera was because it was just always that kind of thing that pretty much just drew my interest. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you always have like this masked, mysterious figure, I mean, it's just like ooh, just that mystery.
Yeah, I
So
really like the plot a lot. It's
yeah,
good.
and it's really interesting, and the fact that it has been one of the longest Broadway musicals. Andrew Lloyd Webber. I mean, it was the music is just fantastic. I mean,
I like the
it's
music.
awesome. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it came out in 1986 and it's based on the French novel in 1910.
Mhm.
I'm going to try to pronounce it Le Fantôme de l'Opéra, maybe, hopefully.
Mhm. And
But yeah, the play, as you said, is extremely popular. And I feel
mhm.
like the music is really catchy and it's something that kind of just stands out in everyone's mind. Even if, like me, even if you hadn't seen it, you were aware of at least the music.
If I'm not mistaken, I want to say there was a black and white version of this film as well, and it may have had. I can't remember. I don't think it was Bela Lugosi. It might have been one of. It was one of like the original actors of some of the classic monster films, and it was more of the like the horror type. So that's one of the reasons why I love the version of this movie because it was so much more romanticized.
Ah,
Um, and plus, like I said, throwing in my favorite actor, I'm like, I'm there. That's all you have to do because, oh my gosh, I've just gushed all over this movie because even my husband's like, oh, you're watching that again. I was like, yes, I am. Leave me alone. I mean,
um,
I even love music so much. I actually have the soundtrack. So it's like some days it's like I'll just pop it in and listen to that because the one thing that's so fun about this or so fantastic about this movie is you got Emily Rossum. She's got a fantastic voice, anyways, and I believe she
yes.
was opera trained, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds
Um,
right. Like most of the people in the movie sing
mhm,
except Minnie Driver.
right, but Gerard Butler, he was not musically trained. Matter of
That's
fact,
right.
he was not even like trained, like theater trained, or like
Hmm.
he never went to like acting schools or anything like that. So for him to come in with that rawness of just, because I remember the first time heard his voice, I'm like, oh, okay, I love you even more now.
I feel like Gerard Butler started out more like kind of like romantic, handsome type roles
Mm-hmm.
until
Mm-hmm.
like 300 or what. Was it 300 that I'm thinking? Yeah.
Well, and you know, it's like you're trying to choose like the all the like has fall like Olympus has fallen, Angel has fallen, what is London has fallen. Those
Hmm.
I love those movies too. So that's why it was really hard because I was like, I love this guy as an actor, but it's just so hard to pick a film. And so when I started thinking about it, I was like, well, Phantom of the Opera is one that I could just literally watch over and over and over and over. So I just love this film. I just absolutely love it. I love the costume. I love the scenery. I love the visuals. I love the music. I just love it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was nice getting to see like the full story. And you're right, I do think there was an older like black and white film because my husband was
Mm-hmm.
saying the same thing. He was like, I think I saw that first. He's like, that's what I've seen. So when I told him I saw this movie, he was like, oh, from like the 19, like a black and white movie. And I'm like, no, it was like 2004. And I was kind of like explaining to him about the musical and stuff like that. And he was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
no, I think I've only seen the black and white one. So I was like, well, this is what I remember, but I'll admit I didn't realize who the cast was. Like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know it was Gerard Butler,
Mm-hmm.
and Patrick Wilson. That surprised me too, and Minnie Driver.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, this is quite a few names in it.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of them. There's like Miranda Richardson. I mean, you
Uh
don't really
huh.
think about that as well. I mean, it's there's a lot of folks in this movie, and that's what's so crazy because especially like Patrick Wilson, because he was in Aquaman. Of course, he's been in like other films as well, but the only thing I can really think about that might have been general audience for somebody to see would be Aquaman.
And,
And you know,
and
that's
the
how.
what do you call them? The those movies, the Conjuring,
Yes.
also.
See, I haven't seen those films because horror is not really my thing,
Oh, gotcha. No
but
worries.
I
But
know of it. Yes.
I liked him in those movies, and I was like, "Is it just me, or is he handsome?" And then I saw this, and I was like, "Oh, well, I guess he was like playing handsome roles for a long time. It was not
Oh
just
yeah,
me."
and that's what's so fun about it. It's just I don't know. It's just one of those films where you see people that you recognize, but it's just like, especially in the very beginning, I love how it opens up because it starts out black and white,
Hmm.
and then you see like older versions of characters. I mean, you can kind of tell they're aged, above, but it's just really haunting. The way
Hmm.
they actually start it, and then when you actually go into the opera house, because the opera house is like a character unto itself as well.
Yes, yeah,
With the opulence, and you have like the underneath the catacombs, the darkness and all that
I
kind of
love
thing.
it. Yes.
Exactly. And so when it opens up, and you bring up that chandelier, and it just like goes into full like bloom, you're like, oh, okay, I'm here. I'm here. So it's just really, it grabs your attention. And like I said, it's just, like a music, the music starts right from the very beginning. And like I said, I love the opulence of it as well. Like I said,
Hmm.
the costumes, and even with Minnie Driver's character, being the main, the singer, that kind of thing, and just seeing how kind of crazy that is, and just the really interesting part of like the actual theater itself, or
Hmm.
like the lives of like all the theater folk. You've got the cast, you've got even with the dancers, even with like the
Hmm.
behind the scenes, that kind of thing. So I'm curious, what were some of your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of Moulin Rouge, which came
Mm-hmm.
out in 2001. But obviously, different director, Lars. I can never say his name correctly. I need to look it up really fast so that I don't
That's a
say it wrong.
fantastic movie too. That's another one I can watch over and over again. I love it.
Me too. Boz Lerman. Okay. Hopefully I said that right. But not the same director, but it's Joel Schumacher, which is surprising to me. Like I didn't realize this was directed by Joel Schumacher, so kind of
Mm-hmm.
cool. But it has that kind of visually striking style that he had.
Mm-hmm.
And I did really like when it, like you said, it transitions from, we see that little monkey box thing that we're going to see
Mm-hmm.
later, but like when it shows the opera house for the first time and you see all the dancers and their costumes and stuff, that part reminded me a lot of like the
Mm-hmm.
opening in Moulin Rouge. So I liked that. And It's a little long. It's probably like 2.5 hours. I think it says 143 minutes, almost 2.5 hours. But I didn't feel the length. I thought it was good pacing and really good. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. And I liked seeing, for me anyway, it was a very different type of role for Gerard Butler.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really like that too. I thought he did a really good job. He made the Phantom compelling while, at the same time I thought he was, you know, a monster. I mean, he is.
Yeah.
But it's like they balanced that really well, I thought, in the movie, where I did feel empathy for him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because throughout the film, it was just so funny because it's like you're I always signed his notes. You're the opera ghost, and so you had the two fellows that actually owned the opera house, and they're like, "Who's this?" It's like, "Keep my box open." What are you talking about? It was, but I think one of my favorite. God, I probably have like so many favorite scenes, but it was like the actual masquerade. Now I'm
Oh,
gonna tell you, but if
yes. I
if you're
love
having
that
a
part.
day, if you love the music and you're having a day where you just want to kind of celebrate or just be boisterous, throw um that music on. Oh man, my car has like been singing from hood to boot to everywhere else, just masquerade, that kind of thing. So I'm like, oh yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes. But I think another one of my favorite scenes is actually when you meet the Phantom for the first time. It's like
Hmm.
because you hear him singing to Christine throughout the beginning,
Yeah.
but when after her performance, um, and you actually meet him, see him taking her down to his lair, so to speak, you're just like, oh, I fell in love with him right then and there. I was like, oh my gosh, you can steal me away anytime, steal me away anytime. So yeah, it was really interesting because it was just not. It's like it was like he was more about her voice and
Hmm.
being her teacher and that kind of thing. Because now that song, the Phantom of the Opera itself, that has played in my car more times than I can count as well. So
I
that's a
love
really fun
that.
one too.
Have you ever encountered people that really like musicals and operas, kind of having like a weird opinion about this one? Like, I was trying to explain it to Nick, but I remember like growing up, some of the theater people that I knew were like, "Ugh, I don't consider this like they were kind of like, I don't know, like
Kind of
stuffy
snobbish
about it."
about it, or yeah,
Yeah, a little
not really,
snobbish, and I wondered why that is. If you knew, or like, because to
not
me, I
really.
was
I
like,
was
I don't know, it seems great to me, but I'm like, is there something about it that was it just really popular and that's why they have to like be different and not like it, or like, do you know why that is?
To be honest, I really didn't run any like theater circles, because I mean I was way out of school by the time this came out, so it was kind of like it was I had my own opinion, which I mean
Well,
if I
that's
like something,
good.
I like something. I mean it is what it is. I mean if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. Um, I pretty much try to have an open mind. I can probably see how, if someone in theater may have thought that it might have felt like that because it was a bit commercialized, but
I was gonna
I
say
don't
maybe it's like
care.
the Hollywood aspect, because I mean, like,
Maybe
I
so.
love Moulin Rouge, and but it same
Mm-hmm.
thing, with the big names. I think the Chicago one too. Like when that movie
Mm-hmm.
came out, people were kind of weird about it, but then over time, I think because those actors aren't like necessarily as popular as they were then, they see it a little differently. I feel like one thing too might be that because we both same thing in the sense that like I did not grow up like seeing Broadway plays. I didn't see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
musicals. I think this is like a good musical that pulls you in, especially if you're not into tons of
Mm-hmm.
musicals. Like it's a good like starter musical maybe. And so maybe that's why like if you're really into them, you're like, oh well, they like other ones. Kind of like when somebody loves music and they know
Mm-hmm.
all these different bands and stuff, and you're like, oh, you like what's popular. It's like, well, yeah, I'm not as introduced to all that stuff as you are, so maybe that's what
Right.
it is. Because I feel
Well, it's
like
kind of like. when you
Yeah.
think about musicals, you think about like Sound of Music, you think of Grease, you think of, things like that.
Yeah.
Um, with this one, to me, I felt it was a film with music. It
I
wasn't like it
agree.
was music with the film around it.
Mhm. Yeah,
And,
there's plenty
that,
of songs, but it's not quite as much as, like, The Sound of Music.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and maybe another thing, because a lot of them, like I said, I think Emmy Ross was actually like trained. I think a
Mhm.
lot of other ones weren't. So it was kind of like you're putting these actors in there and, you're basically creating, I mean, but it had been like a Broadway musical for so many years.
Yeah, since
And now anytime you turn
1986.
something into a film, I mean, people you've got purists. I mean, you got purists in everything. So
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not a purist.
yeah.
I
Oh,
enjoyed it, but
me either.
I just wanted to know your thoughts. I feel
Yeah.
like it's a good movie for people that don't know a lot about, like, the story and, like, haven't seen the musical,
Hmm.
I guess as far as musicals go, for me personally, I really have always loved Les Miserables because,
Hmm.
honestly, my mother really loved it.
Hmm.
But I didn't see this one, but it was also, like, very popular, when I was younger, and I wanted to see it. I would see it. The movie definitely piqued my interest. It's got all this exciting stuff, like you said. You've got, like,
Hmm.
you know, literally a phantom of the opera, this guy with this,
You've
obsession
got
with this starlet. I love his lair that you get to see later, in the catacombs, like, all that stuff was really
uh-huh.
fun, and there's, like, a big fire, like, there's just, like, a lot of, like, fun, kind of dramatic things that happen throughout the film that
Well,
are
you've got the
entertaining.
heroine, you've got the hero, you've got the villain, you've got, it's you've got swords, you've got horses, you've got, it's big costumes, you've got, it's just there's so much there that you have like this really interesting story, and you finally get some sort of, which I don't think, if because I think it deviated from the actual story just a hair. I can't remember if I've actually read the book. I mean, it's been, oh my gosh, there's been so many like books and whatnot I've read. I can't even remember if I've read, that one. Um, I know I remember growing up, like when I was younger, I had this. It was like an abridged version of it, so it was like more. It was weird. It was like this big book. It wasn't very thick, but it was covered in like canvas, so it had a
Mhm.
lot of photos, which I know I still have it around here somewhere. But I just remember looking at that. Um, but even in this iteration, where you did kind of get a backstory on Eric, which is the opera ghost,
Mhm.
how you know how he came to be, or at least, like I said, in this version, how he came, to become the opera ghost. And I think it was through the eyes or the storytelling of Madame Cherie. And so that gave like another level of, okay, let's try to understand this guy's psyche as to why he's doing what he's doing. Um, and so, you go through that whole story of Christine and Raoul, and you're like, oh, it's like a typical little love story. And of course, then you got to throw the Phantom in there to kind of mix it up a little bit. And then, they've got to fight over her, and they've got to do this, that, and the other. And finally, I know I'm kind of glossing over a lot of stuff, but
Oh,
like some of the, my favorite scenes is like the sword fight that Raoul
yeah.
and the Phantom have in the graveyard, in the cemetery. That was really interesting. You have like a little bit of, oh, we're gonna fight, that kind of thing. You got to fight over the girl. Um, and then also when on the top of the theater, where you have Christine and Raoul kind of basically declare their love for each other. That was
Mhm.
a heartbreaking moment, because then you
Yeah.
saw the Phantom. I was like, oh no, can he find a little bit of love too? Because you gotta feel bad for this guy. And then of course,
Yeah, even though he's violent, I mean, when you find out his backstory, you feel sorry
mm-hmm.
for him.
Yeah, I mean, just like, that's like, this dude really didn't have a chance to begin with. I mean, that's
Mhm.
why his mind's kind of, corrupt in a certain, certain form. But then also when you get reach like the final crescendo of, he writes his opera. Oh my gosh, the name escapes me. Don Juan. Yes, it's Don Juan something something. And that was an intense scene too, especially
Yeah.
the when Christine finally realizes it's that Phantom that's in that character, because that's a little intense. I'm like, whoa, got a little spicy real quick. But so, and then once you get past that and they're trying to trap the ghost, it was so interesting how when they're actually going through the catacombs, and like Madame Cherie says, just like keep your hand to the level of your eyes, and you're thinking, why? Oh, you find out real quick because there's a lot of booby traps in that catacomb.
Yeah.
So that's when it gets like you get more of the action aspect of it. But then towards the very like basically like one of the end of it, when you're actually the Phantom has like basically kidnapped Christine, and he's like giving her ultimatum. She's like, you stay with me and I'll let him live and blah blah blah. And that's so heartbreaking. That's just so
Yeah.
heartbreaking because finally when she makes the choice, and that one kiss, you're just like, oh, oh my gosh, that is just like, oh, you probably like break into like a million pieces. I know I just like melted.
Aw.
I was like, stay with him, lady. What's wrong with you? But even when she snatches the mask off and you see like the disfigurement, whatever, he's still hot. I'm sorry. I know that's terrible, but I'm just like, oh my gosh. But but yeah, that was really interesting. So I know, like I said, I know I've glossed over a lot of it, but
No.
then then finally you see the like you said the monkey, like the music box, and when everybody, because that final scene after you see that when he's singing the Phantom, that kind of thing, and breaks that mirror, and you're just like, oh my gosh, that is just like the ultimate. I don't know what it is about that scene, but it's just like I have no words. I just absolutely have no words. It's like all emotion. You're just like, ah, that kind of thing, where you want to like rewind it and watch it again.
You know
But
what I was yeah.
no, I was just saying. I was just trying to finish that thought because that
Oh,
scene is
no,
like
go for it.
literally seared into my brain. It's like I can listen to the music and I can see that, and it's just like that's why I love this movie so much. It's crazy. I don't know
I
if I've ever
love
gushed
it.
on a movie like this as much.
I love it. To me, the plot of this movie, like, when I found out it was based on a French novel, that didn't surprise me at all because the plot reminds me a lot of, like, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It
Mm-hmm.
also kinda reminds me a little bit of Beauty and the Beast. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's something about, like, that seems to be like a reoccurring theme in like French literature for whatever reason. Like a guy that's like a beast or a monster and a pretty woman, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I feel like when you mentioned earlier that like when you see him, under the mask, you're like he's still beautiful. I mean, I feel like I don't know. There's something about like him wearing the mask and being disfigured. It almost feels like a metaphor, like he is
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, but then he's got this dark side, and literally like half his face is, dark.
It's like that twisted part of him that's is you don't really see that because it's covered by
Hmm.
the mask, but it's just like that twisted part that like the twisted bit of his psyche that just kind of, it's like you like, he feels like he means well. It's like he has this idea, but in actuality, it's not healthy at all
Hmm.
because you can't
Yeah.
trap somebody and keep them
Right.
prisoner in
Which
essence.
again is something that like the Beast did, right? Like he like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, said I'm not going to let go of your dad unless I can keep you, or maybe that was in the just the Disney version, I don't know, but like
Right.
that's what I
Yeah.
base it off
Exactly.
of. But
It's like Bale had to make a choice. It's like
mhm.
either your your father's life, for you to stay here. And of course,
Yeah.
being the heroine she is, she's like, of course, yes. Same thing
But
goes
in
for
a
Christine.
mhm. And in a similar way, like he starts out really coming in really hot, and harsh. And then her, the female heroine's good nature is like what makes him change his mind. Like he wants to be mean to Christine, but then, and force
Hmm.
her to stay, but then when she is so kind to him and it's like, what happened to you? Like, why are you like this? I thought, and he ends up feeling so overwhelmed, he like lets her go. I
Exactly.
thought that was really touching.
Yeah, that's a pretty heavy moment too, because it's like
Mhm.
you it's like sometimes it makes you kind of like question some of your life choices, because you're just like, okay, well, you're so dead set on this, but yet just someone shows you, like you said, kindness, or shows you. I mean, I don't, it was almost like a form of pity, but
Mhm.
it's where she's like, I just feel sorry for you because you just really didn't know any better, and
Yeah.
it just kind of gives him that little bit like of kindness, that little bit of you know she gives kind of like a piece of herself, and then that
Mhm.
really like it changes him. It
Yeah.
just it reaches some part of that twisted psyche to where it's like, okay, well, it's like you reach the center. It's like the rose bloomed again.
Yeah. In the movie, do they say why he's disfigured? Or, like, I don't
No,
remember
it's
if
just
they
basically it's just inferred, because when you see him, I mean, he's just a child in like a sideshow, and
That's
you
right,
never
yeah.
see his face because he has like the hood on.
Mhm.
But it was the fact that he had been treated so badly, and
Mhm.
basically just treated like an oddity. So
Yeah.
that's why, he finally broke loose, and, had kind of hidden away from the world, because the world never gave him any kindness. So why
Yeah.
should he give it in return?
Right,
You
right.
know,
Yeah, I
there,
think I read, like, I think in the novel or maybe in the play or something that, like, his mother drank poison because she didn't wanna have a kid, and
hmm
then it somehow that disfigured him, but again, like, that part kinda reminds me a little bit of, like, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, like,
hmm
hiding in the tower and, longing for a real human connection with
hmm
people and with, specifically a partner. It's kinda like that, except that he's, like, nicer, at least the Disney version is nicer. I'm gonna go
yeah.
on the Disney version again. I did read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, but it was a long time ago. I feel like he wasn't quite as nice in that,
No,
but,
and that's the thing about it. When you actually read the novels, it's a little bit different than seeing like the
yeah,
films a lot of time.
but it's interesting, it's like, I wonder I guess that just happens, like, in a culture where there's, like, themes that are kind of explored over and over again, and I just thought that was,
hmm
like, an interesting part of it, but yeah, like, I think all the scenes you talked about, I agree, those were, like, the biggest scenes for me. I really liked anytime oh, one thing I was gonna ask about, I feel like I can't remember, or I feel like I missed something when the Phantom kills one of the stagehands, I guess, like, by hanging him,
hmm
what was that punishment for? Like, why did he go after that guy in particular again?
Well, it's kind of like one of those things where the Phantom, he saw it as his opera house. It wasn't
Oh,
anybody else.
okay.
It was his opera house. So it was kind of his way of um, marking his territory,
Okay, okay, okay.
because yeah, because he had like ample freedom, and so you had this one guy that it's almost like it's like he kind of like challenged his authority.
I see, I see, I see.
hmm
Okay, that makes sense. Um And I think that's, like, maybe to remind us, like, "Hey, this guy's pretty ruthless." Like, sometimes
Yes.
we feel bad for him and we start getting to be on his side, and then he does something like that, and you're like, "Ooh, this guy's kind of a bad guy." Kinda
Yeah,
scary.
exactly.
And poor Christine, like, believes that, he's like an angel,
hmm
like a guardian, and then at a certain point, she believes it's, like, her father's spirit or an angel sent by her father, and it takes,
Yeah.
like,
At
her
first, she thinks it's like her. Yeah, it's like the angel of music that was sent by her father, because apparently her father died when she was young.
yeah. But
So
luckily,
because she,
oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, it's like that was interesting, trying to understand that relationship. How she knew Raul, and
Mhm.
because they kind of talked about how they knew each other as children, and that kind of thing. And then when she would talk about her father, and apparently he was big in music, so it was something that they had a commonality with. And just to see it as, and that was a way of basically the Phantom trying to exploit that. He
Yeah.
knew, he would hear this, and he's like, oh, okay, that's my way in.
Mhm.
So that was, it's kind of creepy, but
Yeah, like, it's not a good way to get with
not
somebody.
yeah, not a very healthy relationship, shall we say?
Yeah, yeah, I don't think he had a lot of healthy relationships with anyone, it seemed like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think he really it's kind of like didn't really have a chance to begin with, but
Mhm. He has that one pal that's in the theater, that one girl that, like, helped him escape
yeah,
to,
that's
like,
Madame
live in
Cherie.
there.
She's like the I, g- I was trying to I still cut it's she's like one of those characters that's just there, but I
Mhm.
think she was actually a dancer because her daughter is one of the dancers. This is a friend of
Oh, okay.
Christine. Um, so she's kind of like told the stories throughout. So she always kind of keeps the story of the Phantom going because the Phantom always gives her the notes to give to everyone else,
Oh, yeah,
and
that's right.
she assumes it, and she's like, "Here's a note from the Phantom," and they're like, "What?" Especially the two fellas that own it, they're hilarious.
Yeah.
Um, they're just like trying to. And Carlotta, which is Minnie Driver's character, they try to keep her happy because she's such a diva.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, she's like
she's
the
an interesting
definition of a
character
diva.
too.
Yeah.
But especially how the Phantom basically sabotages her voice. So there, Christine gets the opportunity to actually, be the star for once.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget the frog noise where Carlotta's trying to go through her scales and just like, oh, like, oh my gosh, that was like
Yeah,
the
the
funniest
Phantom
thing.
did that to her, right? Because he, like,
Hmm.
wasn't happy with her.
Well, like I said, he was trying to push her off. And plus, like I said, he wasn't happy with her, but to give Christine, the limelight. So
Mhm.
it worked.
It did. Yeah. His tricks tended to work, so.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was really interesting towards the end where, like I said, it's like when the Phantom finally exits, and then and then her, Madame Cherie's daughter finds the music box.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, or the very end, it's like you go back to the beginning where it's present day. And apparently, you see
Mhm.
where Raoul and Christine had married and, had a nice little long life or whatnot. And then he put the music box down. And then right beside it was a rose with a ribbon and a ring tied to it.
Yeah.
Because I think that was the ring that Raoul had given Christine, but somehow, I can't remember how, but I think the Phantom got it.
I think Christine gave it to him. Like, she felt bad for
Okay.
him and, like, to remember her by, she, like, gave
No,
him the ring.
he had put that ring on her finger. And then when she left, after she
Oh.
kissed him, she took it off and handed it back to him.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And then that's when he's like, just leave, get out of here, go, bye. And then that's when he like just
Yeah.
burned everything down. So that was a really haunting moment as well because you're like, oh, is he still out there? What? It's like he really is a phantom. He's everywhere.
Yeah. I forgot to mention my 3 quick facts, I'll mention them here. We talked about the theater fire, and apparently that was, like, an actual fire that Joel
Hmm.
Schumacher wanted realism, so they, like, literally destroyed the theater for that scene, which I thought was
Hmm.
kinda neat. Also in playing Christine's father in this movie, Raman Karimloo became the only actor to have played all 3 of Christine's loves. She plays his father in the movie version, and then Raoul and the Phantom on stage.
Oh, nice.
So kind of a full circle moment. And then all the principal actors, we kind of already mentioned this one, sang in the film except for Minnie Driver. Most of the actors have a background in musicals or opera, but Driver, a skilled singer, had no experience in opera. And so she was dubbed by Margaret Preece, a singing teacher. However, Driver did contribute to the film's end title song, Learn to Be Lonely, which was written specifically for the film by Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. There's like just so many fun things about films like this. You learn
Yeah,
so
I
much.
agree. Mhm. Yeah, it's fun. Like I said, especially since I hadn't sat down and watched this before, I felt like I learned so much about it, like watching it and then reading about it. I was just curious. Now I need to go see it. Was
Oh, I
there
know.
anything that we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to talk about? Like anything else?
I don't think so. I mean, it's pretty much. Sorry, that's my child in the background here. He's
No, it's
giggling.
okay.
Sorry,
That's fine.
but no, that's about it. I mean, I think I basically kind of touched on. There's just so much. I mean, I could probably just talk about it forever. It feels like, but But anyone, if you know, if you haven't, if anyone hasn't seen it, I recommend it. If you've seen it, if you already seen it, see it again. It's a real treat. It's just an absolute. It's like that. You know, you get like a bowl of ice cream, and then you know your favorite ice cream, and you put all these fun toppings on it, and then you put that little cherry on top, and you're just like, you just can't help but devour, and it's just so good. That's like the feeling I get from this movie. It's just it takes you through so many emotions. You know, visually, you know, you see it's like you see it with your eyes, you hear, you know, you hear it with your ears. I mean, it's just, you know, you go through this myriad of emotions with the characters. I mean, I just absolutely love it.
Wow, you really summed it up well. I was gonna ask you like what keeps you coming back and what's your pitch, but I think you nailed it already.
Plus, I love Gerard Butler too. So I mean, it's, I can't, you know, I mean, a man in a mask and you know a cape and you know, especially that can sing because his voice is just so you can tell it's not trained because I think it was the fact that you know he never really had. I think I read somewhere he never had a singing lesson, but it was his voice that kind of it just added more to the character. You know, that
Yeah.
little bit of rawness, you know, that kind of thing. And it's just like, okay, I believe it. Because I'll
Yeah.
throw the soundtrack in and I'll just listen to it. I just want to hear his voice.
I know it's a popular soundtrack for sure. Well,
Oh yeah,
Sarah, thank
absolutely.
you. Thank you so much for introducing me to this movie and thank you for picking it. I hope to have you back soon.
Oh yes, absolutely. Anytime.